Welcome back. I'm artist Avon Waters, and I specialize in pastel, oil, mixed media, and anything pastel, wet pastel, dry pastel. Today, let's talk about selling your art. Maybe more specifically, about selling art and what you want your art to do for you. I'm going to get into what are the odds that you might sell, what are the odds that lightning might strike and you become one of the top artists. It's a big topic. So let's narrow it down to what might be best. What are some of the basic decisions you have to make when you decide to make art and you decide to sell art? I'm going to paint along and talk to you about selling art and maybe paint one or two paintings as we go or get them started. When we're talking about this topic, I think we have to think about where we live definitely matters. I don't live in New York City. I don't live in Chicago. I don't live in LA. I live in the middle of nowhere. It's a 20-minute drive for me to get to any town of any size. If I want to sell art, then it's an hour and a half to 2-hour drive to the nearest of, I've only got 2 cities close to me, to the nearest of any 2 cities that have a gallery where collectors might buy my work. Just FYI, this is a 36 by 36 I'm working on from a previous color study I did. It's got a lot of reds and red oranges eventually. I'm going to do the underpainting in acrylics. So what do those big city, like Chicago, LA, and New York City, what do they have in common that you and me and I'm not a part of? You might wonder why I'm even mentioning them at all. Well, those are the 3, depending on what list you look at, those are the 3 top art centers for major arts in the United States. I think all of you knew that New York City was a major center. Depends what list you look at, where Chicago and LA fall. So why is it important to look at these cities? Or maybe a better question that I know I ask myself, and maybe you should ask yourself, is it important to look at these cities? After all, I just told you that there's 2 cities less than 2 hours from me where I can find collectors. I think it's important that we ask ourselves these questions, especially if we make art. Not all of us want to live in a city, let alone move to a large one. So how can we right size our expectations? If we're looking for recognition, whether it's locally, regionally, in our own state, or if we're looking for reputations that are more national, those things have to play into some of the decisions we make. There's a huge difference between collectors where I live and those in the major cities. So I think each of us has to decide, what is it we want? What do we want our art to do for us? And I think if you are making art, at some point, many of us want to sell it. So I think maybe I'm talking to those that, decide that they want to sell their art. And I guess the first question you'd have to ask is, why do we make art? That answer to that question maybe isn't the same for all of us. I make art because it's part of who I am. I think a lot of you that might be the reason you make art. That may be the same answer for you too. And I bet if I had access to those New York artists or Chicago artists, I bet a lot of them would say the same. It's the same for those artists in those big art centers. When I'm not in my studio, my life just isn't very satisfying. In other words, I make art to be happy. I make art to feel alive. And it isn't really an option for me. It's not an option for me not to make art if I want to be as happy as possible. That's what I've discovered later in life. So back to that question, what is it that we expect our art to do for us once we've made it? Once we've made it, for some the answer is simple, to sell it. It kind of goes on, after that question, there's other things it can do for us. And what does selling really mean? And what does it really mean when we want it to do something else for us? And that's where I think where we live, that really affects sales. And it really affects the question of how do we want to be recognized with our art? I mean, it's one thing to make the art and get an occasional sale. Somebody says, oh, I like that. You know, they see you painting it, maybe you're a plein air painter or something, and they buy it. That's always satisfying. It's always satisfying when you get it in a show or an exhibition and it sells, or you get an award. There's a certain feedback loop, I think, that if we reach the point we want to sell something, it also means we want some sort of recognition, and I think we have to figure that out. When you say you want to sell your art, that automatically implies certain things that you and I have to do. You know, I've mentioned in previous videos how I read a lot of artist biographies, and it's really interesting. In the 1800s and the early 1900s, there were actually collectors who would visit people like Picasso and Matisse, and even I read about the women on 9th Street in the 1940s and 50s, the abstractionists, and even then there were some gallery owners that actually paid a stipend to some of these artists. Pollock got a stipend to produce work. If you find that, let me know, because I'm not sure that even exists anymore. I don't think it is. I think that's the first surprise is if any of you found a collector that would say, you know, I really like your work. I want to support you for the rest of your life, or at least for the next year or two. Mondrian did that. He had a supporter. It was year by year. And a collector would send him a stipend to help him continue to paint and make his art. So good luck with that. I suppose that still actually happens, but I don't have any friends that do that. If you do, put it in the comments. I'd like to know. But I can assure you that's not the norm. Not the norm from the people that I know and the other artists I run into. No, if you decide you want to sell your art, there's an unspoken set of expectations. Whether you live here or whether you live in New York City. If you live in one of those top 3 art centers, or you're somewhere else in the world and the large metro areas are your biggest art centers, it automatically means you've got to compete for gallery space, exhibitions, or pop-up shows and exhibitions. You've got to figure out how to get noticed by the media. And I don't just mean social media. In the large metro areas, you've got to get noticed by the print media. A lot of those newspapers still have cultural sections. You got to figure out how to get into there. Those artists, they have to try and get into those national magazines, like at New York City Art News. I'm not sure if Art in America is still around, but if it is, you got to figure out how to get into there. I think depending on how well those artists do that determines if and when they find high dollar collectors. There's gatekeepers out there in those large metro areas. Those gatekeepers, they kind of tell the high dollar collectors, and this has been true for ages, maybe a century or more. They tell the investors who buy art as an investment, they tell those, you know, this is a good investment. This artist has or will have significant historical place. I think the truth is there's a lot of people that pay high dollar for art. Those folks, I think typically they rely on those gatekeepers. So there's a huge difference. Me doing art at the level I'm at, and many of you, the levels that you'll be at, it just is impossible for us to reach those gatekeepers usually. So you have to make a decision early on or at some point, you know, am I happy doing what I'm doing? Am I happy with the sales I've got? Or do I need to move? Do I need to move to one of those big metro areas? And if you do, you're going to have to compete for that limited space. And you're going to have to compete to get noticed nationally and internationally through those print medias that are still run by the gatekeepers, I think. What those big city artists have to do and what we have to do is slightly different. I think it's about the same. I mean, we're all competing for limited gallery space. There's not very many galleries within 4 or 5 hours from where I live. I've got to go to Chicago 4.5, 5 hours away before I even have a shot at getting more than just a handful in one community and one over in this one and one over in that one. So we are in a way still competing like they are for limited space, but we don't have that print media. We only have social media. For us, we're on a much smaller scale. So the process is nearly the same, but the way we go about it has to be a little bit different. I know for me and my friends, the last 8-10 years, social media has really been a game changer. Now, you don't just have to sell through a gallery. You can have pop-up shows, art associations. There's a lot of art associations. You don't have to belong to just one. If you are like me, I'm within equal driving distance of about 4 different art associations. So there's an opportunity to exhibit, hang, and maybe sell and win a little prize money at those exhibits. But in the last few years, I don't know, this is something you guys can put in the comments too. The last few years, I think Zuckerberg and his type have tightened up the algorithms. It used to be I could paint a painting, post it, and say, hey, here's what I did today or yesterday or this week. It's available. If you tried to sell something, they closed it down as soon as you put a dollar sign on it. But you could say something like, for 100 dead presidents, I'll give you this little study. And your post would get just as many reads as telling somebody what you fixed for breakfast, or what your kids, something funny your cat or kids did. But that's kind of changed. They've kind of tightened up those algorithms that you put about dead presidents or available, and they've gotten good at sorting out phrases, and those posts now get buried. So if I want to post a picture of my cat's going to get way more hits than my art. I guess I want to warn those of you who maybe are searching for a higher level or a higher set of collectors, for those hoping one day that they'll be found or discovered or noticed. If getting something that's more than local recognition, you're hoping to become more famous and that's your goal, then right from the beginning you better start by trying to get into those large art markets. I think without living in those large centers, the probability of others, of us getting in Art News or Art in America, magazines like that, I think is pretty slim to none, and maybe none has already left town. If you're familiar with the bell curve, think of it this way. Those artists that are getting national recognition in those magazines and the big art centers, and the gatekeepers are sending the high dollar collectors, they're at the outside edges. They're at the outside edges of that bell curve, that little narrow part where there's a small percentage. The rest of us are stuck in the middle, where 2/3 to 80% of us are in the middle, and our options are a little different. But I'm here to talk to you, and I'll share with you, you can get noticed. You can get noticed in that larger area, and you can get national and international recognition. 2.5, 3 years ago, I resigned myself to lower expectations about where will I end up. I mean, I'm getting older. As life goes on, you make changes, you make adjustments. So if you've got an interest and you still want to get outside of that state and regional showing, I suggest you look for art organizations that have national, international competitions. For me, I did a little research. Pastel is my favorite medium, so I looked up the international IAPS, International Association of Pastel Societies. All the pastel organizations of the world are under that one umbrella of that organization. The local chapters pay a fee to be part of that organization, and then every artist that is a part of a local chapter can submit to the annual competitions and the national and international competitions. Acrylic and oil painters have NOAPS, which is I think called the National Oil Acrylics Painter Society. Then there's OPA, which is the Oil Painters of America, I think. If you paint marine scenes, there's Marine Painters of America, there's wildlife, there's portrait organizations. All those things are available, and most of them have national, and some of them have international juried competitions. Now we're operating at a different level than those people in the large metro areas trying to get in and break into that national scene, the international scene, and art mags. But these organizations also have art magazines that are really, really nice, glossy, well done magazines. So you still have the option of getting national and international recognition through those organizations and get published in some of those magazines. Plein Air magazine, Streamline. Streamline has Fine Art Connoisseur. Plein Air magazine is for plein air painters. Really nice publications, great stories. There's the Pastel Journal. There's a number of other magazines that I'm just not recalling their names right now. But in a few cases, I've noticed something. When I started 3 years ago competing at these nationals, they're not easy to get into. They're juried, and they're juried by really, really well-known jurors. But when I got in, I was looking for some recognition beyond my state borders and my local organizations. What I didn't realize, and was a great surprise, was that it's increased my sales. And it's also increased my reputation as an artist. In a few cases, I even won a couple awards. And the prize money is significantly higher in those shows than it is at your local and regional typically. At least for the state where I live it is. Not only that, but a few times when I received an award when I was in a national or international show, that artwork was sold. So it's kind of a way that those judges became the gatekeepers that told smaller collectors that, yeah, this was worthy of an award, so it's safe to buy this. That's kind of funny because all of us have stories about how we put something in, it gets rejected, and then we put it in the next show and it wins an award. So it's kind of funny that that's the case, but hey, that's what it is. And then the pieces that are in shows but don't win awards, whether it's local, regional, whatever, this is a good practice. Write down on the back of those paintings where those pieces have shown, and if they win awards, put it on them. Because your local galleries, my local gallery, has successfully sold all those paintings that were previously accepted that didn't get awards and sell. I'm going to share a Bob Ross story with you. This is like one of my favorite Bob Ross stories. I mean, he's been dead since I think the 93 or 94, but he was on, and this is a true story. He was on a TV talk show, and the host asked, "Do you think you think that your work will ever end up like in the Smithsonian Museum?" And he says, he laughed a little, and he says, no, it probably will never make the Smithsonian, but maybe my work will continue beyond me and be in some galleries after I'm gone. And none of his work today is in any of those galleries. And that's, he thought that was what was in his mind. That was what he thought maybe the legacy of his art would be. But in 2019, the Smithsonian bought 4 of his paintings. He never thought that he would be in the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian bought 4 of his paintings for the permanent collection. So we never know. We never know. Even though we do some planning, career planning, we enter things, we never know what's really going to happen with our work after we're gone. But we do have some control. We can affect our sales by some of the decisions we make, like where we live. If we're living someplace and decide we're not happy with the sales, sometimes we can affect those sales. But either way, we can make decisions that we still get recognition outside of our local organizations and our state boundaries. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching me paint some paintings and talk to you about art sales. There you have it. We can only do what we can do. Hope you've enjoyed that. If you're liking the content of these videos, please hit the like button. Even if you're already a subscriber, hitting that like button will help others find the content more easily. So until next time, everybody, take care, happy painting, and happy sales. I'll have another great topic for you next week. Bye-bye.